Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, and pleased to be joined now by NFL Network reporter Cameron Wolfe. And you can see Cameron on NFL Network's NFL Game Day morning Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. That's going to make for a pretty long day for you, Cameron, if you're starting at 9 and this game kicks off at 8:20, my man. How you doing?
Yeah, man, it's gonna be a long day. How you guys doing? I'm gonna have to take a nap in between or something.
Yeah, we talked about it too. Up here, at this time of year, it gets dark at about 4:30 in the afternoon, and it feels like you kick it off about 1 a.m. But and then post game and all of that. I mean, it's an all nighter. It's like being back in college. What are your thoughts about the early goings? The Dolphins kind of limp into this, but by the same token, they're kind of in the driver's seat at home with the chance to win the division. Is kind of what you'd sign up for at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and that was Mike McDaniel's point this week. They got blown out of the water by the Ravens this past week, and so it's hard to recalibrate on, hey, we can still win the division after you get embarrassed like that. But the reality is, this Dolphins team would have taken this in week one. They would have taken the chance to win the division against the Bills at home week one. But it's hard not to look back and say a month ago they were up 3 games with 5 left, and they let the Bills kind of creep their way back into this division race. And so this game is going to be really intriguing because although the Dolphins are at home, the Bills are favorites. And I think they should be because of how we just saw the Dolphins play, some of their injuries catching up to them. And honestly, the Bills and Josh Allen's dominance over them in past history. He's 10-2, including the playoffs against them, 36 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. And it's sort of that little brother, big brother thing where you got to beat big brother for you ultimately to overcome it. And so I've talked to a lot of guys in that Dolphins locker room who just said, man, I just want to beat the Bills. I just want to show that we can do it. And they're with that opportunity, but it won't be easy.
Yeah, and maybe handicap this as best you can, Cameron, in terms of player availability, in terms of how it's looking right now. How much more difficult does that task become? You already know they don't have Chubb. It's looking like they're not going to have Xavier Howard on the defensive side. It doesn't quite look like Jerome Baker's maybe ready to return. He just started practicing yesterday. And then offensive side, second straight day, no Hill, Waddle, Mostert at practice. So handicap that if you could. How much more difficult does the task become with those guys kind of questionable at best?
Yeah, it's hard, man. It's a complete contrast from Miami and Buffalo's injury reports. You look at Buffalo's injury reports, it looks like week one. They've got maybe 2 or 3 guys on there. And so I think, just kind of rattling down the names you mentioned, Xavier Howard's going to be out, and he's their top corner outside of Jalen Ramsey. And I think that's key because if you remember week 4 matchup when Buffalo played them, Jalen Ramsey wasn't there. And so Kader Kohu, their slot corner, played a lot against Stephon Diggs. Diggs went off for 120 yards and 3 touchdowns. Allen had an amazing day. And you'll see Eli Apple this week as the other corner opposite Jalen Ramsey. I'm really eager to see if Vic Fangio decides to shadow Stephon Diggs. He's been reluctant to do that this year. Diggs hasn't been hot the last month, so maybe that factors in those considerations. But they're going to have to do something to slow up this passing attack because I'd imagine Buffalo is going to want to attack them the same way Lamar did. On the offensive side of the ball, Jalen Waddle has got a shot. He didn't do much in practice. He kind of rehabbed. They're calling it a high ankle sprain, but it's a little bit more of a traditional high ankle sprain, just on the higher end of it. And so Friday will be a big key for him if he can go. Raheem was a surprise last week. They thought he was going to be able to go. He's got ankle and knee injuries he's dealt with all season, but he couldn't cut the way he wanted. So if he plays, I'd expect him to be used in a limited capacity regardless. And so a lot of key injuries for Miami overall, but their mantra all season has been, we got to overcome adversity. Adversity is an opportunity. And so I don't think they're going to use that as an excuse. They just got to play with the guys they got.
What has Mike McDaniel said about this matchup? Not only as him being the offensive play caller, but also the head coach.
Yeah, I think their big key has been trying to slow down the Buffalo Bills front. If you remember that week 4 battle, the Bills had a lot of pressure up front and they didn't have to blitz. And so the key for them is to try to protect Tua so he can have the time to get the ball to a Tyreek or Waddle if he plays. And so I think a premium focus is like respect for this Bills team. We noted the fact that the Dolphins are 7-1 at home this season, and that seems to be somewhat an advantage for them. But he said, hey, look, the Buffalo Bills don't care about that. They're going to come in here trying to take our lunch money. And as Bills fans will note, the last time they played here in Miami, although Miami won, it was 110 degrees outside. It's going to be 60s on Sunday night. And so weather won't be a factor at all. And so although the Dolphins have the home advantage, I think Buffalo has a lot more advantages when it comes to injuries. And as we saw in week 4, the overall matchup.
At the same time, Cameron, Buffalo has won 4 in a row, but they've been grinded out type victories.
Yep.
It's not a lot of high-flying Bills offensive football, maybe with the exception of the win over Dallas when they just ran the tar out of the ball to the tune of 266 yards. They probably haven't played their best quote-unquote game either of late. There's something, though, about Miami that seems to bring out the best in these guys. I haven't even been able to put my finger on it, but for some reason, these guys get up to play this team, whether it's up here or down there.
Yeah, so Vic Fangio had what I thought was one of maybe the quote of the month earlier today, saying that he thinks Josh Allen is John Elway on steroids. And then he paused and said, I don't think that Josh Allen's on steroids. I'm just trying to compare his cannon arm, his ability to run the ball, all the things that John Elway did excellent. I think that's the core of the team, the danger that Josh Allen brings. Like whether, he has a stat line like he's had the last few weeks where the numbers aren't there, he still brings the fear in defenses that at any point he can make that miraculous 60-yard bomb or run somebody over for a 20-yard run. I think that has to keep teams honest. And Vic Fangio mentioned just kind of the dilemma of keeping a linebacker or safety in and shadow Josh Allen so he doesn't kill you with his legs. And you mentioned it. I think the renewed run game also presents an element that Buffalo hasn't had, just being transparent, the last few years. Like Vic Fangio also he was in the mood for making comps. He said that James Cook is the best Bills running back since Thurman Thomas, which I don't think is accurate, but I'm not gonna tell Vic he's he's wrong. James Cook's having a great year. I'll let him ride that comp. But I think there's a lot of respect for what Buffalo can do offensively, even if the numbers haven't translated the last few weeks. And I guess the final thing I would say is the Bills' offensive line has been remarkably healthy, which I think has helped them continuity-wise. And as we talk about a Dolphins defensive line that is lost Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips in the last month, they're going to have to figure out a way to get pass rush or Josh Allen's going to be back there reading a newspaper. And so I think they know the challenge at hand, and there's a lot of respect for Buffalo down here.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the front line of Buffalo. The Bills have started the same offensive line for 16 games, and the Dolphins have had 11 different starting combinations on their side. And, of course, you just mentioned the recent injuries that the Dolphins have suffered on their front line defensively, and the Bills defensively on their front line. They suffered their injuries early, and now they're getting Daquan Jones back in the fold. Ed Oliver's been playing extremely well. They signed Linval Joseph since week 4. Now he's in the fold. And their defensive ends, while a couple of them have injuries, they're not missing practice because of them. So both lines of scrimmage seem to favor, in health-wise anyway, the Buffalo team. But it's easy to say, but that the Buffalo wins that matchup, but they haven't been playing well the last month. I mean, the Bills have won some games, but they're sputtering. What are the thoughts of when you look at this team from your end of this matchup? You got a team in Buffalo that looks like on paper they're a tough matchup, but man, oh man, they're not that impressive when the curtain comes up.
Yeah, if you look at this game, and we've talked a lot about what Buffalo has advantage-wise, and I think there's the reason they're favorite. But if I'm like, why does Miami win this game? If they win this game, I'll look at it this way. This is a team in the Dolphins that when they jump on teams, they get going. And so if we see that Buffalo offense sputter early, I think that's where Miami can take advantage. They do have a red-hot offense. Even last week against Baltimore, they came out and scored 2 touchdowns pretty early, and they ended up going neck and neck with Baltimore, and then ultimately Baltimore just had too much for them. I think that the key will be seeing how the Bills respond to maybe that early jolt. I'd imagine that there's going to be a lot of momentum playing at home, energy, excitement. I would be shocked if the Dolphins offense didn't come out there and maybe have an early scoring drive in those first 2 series. How does Buffalo respond? Can they punch back immediately? That's really the key. I mentioned earlier some of the injuries to the defensive back group. That doesn't really matter if you can't get Stephon Diggs on the field and active. I know his percentages of snaps has been down the last few weeks. This is the week to play him. Buffalo knows the situation. I think it'll be a lot more clear by Sunday night whether or not they need to win to get in. But this isn't the time to hold anyone back. And so I think I'm really intrigued to see, particularly what I just mentioned, the usage of Stephon Diggs. If what has been happening with him for the last month or two, can they figure that out and have him back to that 90+% snap guy who has dominated the Dolphins in recent matchups?
And, Steve mentioned it, how the 11 different line combinations for Miami's O-line has kind of been a constant shuffle all season long. I know they're hoping they get Robert Hunt back this week at the guard spot, but, the Bills are tied with Miami for third in the league in sacks. They're fourth in quarterback hits with 83, and I've seen of late, Tua's been sacked 12 times in the last 4 games. He had only been sacked 12 times over the previous 8 before that. So have they really kind of struggled of late to keep it tied together so that Tua has time to get the ball out?
Yeah, the injuries on the O-line have started to catch up on him. You mentioned the 11 different combinations. They're on their backup center. They've used multiple guards at different spots. Teron Armstead's been in and out of the lineup at the left tackle spot. And so there just has not been a lot of continuity. And if you watch the Dolphins, their offense is timing based. Their goal is to get the ball out of Tua's hands in 2.5 seconds or less. It's first or second read and get it out quickly. That's how they function. And teams have done a really good job playing cover 2, dropping in those zones, and really making Tua have to hesitate for a second and giving that defensive front a chance to catch up. And so I think that matchup is going to be so huge. Can Buffalo Bills defensive front get home with 4? Because as we saw in week 4, they have the linebackers and the safeties to be able to play that zone coverage, to drop into those lanes and make Tua hesitate. Can they hold up as far as an offensive line? I do think they'll get Robert Hunt back this week, which should help them both in pass pro and being able to run the ball. But I think the matchups that I really want to key in on is how the edge rushers, Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson, do against some of the Bills guys off the edge, Greg Rousseau in particular. I think, that's going to decide the matchup. If they can hound Tua and get him down and get him frustrated, get him off his game, his timing off, then I think the Bills win this game.
Thanks so much, Cameron. Appreciate it. It's good talking to you. You covering this game? Are you going to be on the sidelines for this?
I will. I'll be up the sidelines. I'll be up there 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. for game day morning, and then we'll do preview closer to the start of the game, 6:30, right before the game. So I'll be there, and I can't wait.
All right. We'll see you on NFL Network. We'll keep an eye out for you. Thanks, Cameron,
Thanks,
for the time.
Cameron.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you, fellas.